Richard listens on Sports Live from Hollywood and Gower, and today is a very fun and special day. We like to feature live performers on the show by popular request across all domains: musicians, producers, actors, violinists, fire breathers, students. And today we get to tap into a domain which I've come and discovered over the last decade, and with someone very special and dear to me. Today we are going to have our first professional poker player, long considered to be something that was relegated only for a select few men over 50 smoking cigars in back rooms. So today we are going to bring you a mathematical mind, a practical mind, a hard-working mind from a solid, loving family who's going to debunk and maybe illustrate a little bit of the truths behind professional poker playing and talk to us a little bit about his journey. Without further ado, my guest today, live from New York, Mr. Michael Levy. How we doing, Mike?
Hey, Richard. Good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I hope I didn't cut short your playing schedule this week?
No, Jewish holidays, a couple days off, and we're going to take a little break this week and go back to the casino next week.
Yeah. You can't mix energetically fasting and concentrating at the table. I don't
exactly. And sometimes you need a break anyway. So stars align. So it's a week off this week.
Yeah. So. Now talk to me. Now you're from big. We share the love of New York Giants.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
a painful day.
A little Giant fan therapy off yesterday's debacle.
Well, at least if they don't do anything, we can't get excited. So I think they're trying.
That's true, and we still have a lot of games to go. So we'll see what happens there.
That's true. So I have been able to watch some memorable Giants losses with Michael.
Yes.
I don't know if we caught any great victories.
Yes,
but we do have
the
those
Giants 49er infamous blocked at the end. Botched field goal at the end.
Where's the instant replay on penalty calls? We're a decade late and $1 short.
Yeah, we could have used exactly. Yes.
So, quick shout out to all our friends from Southside High School and Rockville Center, New York. And, of course, your parents, David and Carol. So you come from...
Andy and Carol.
I'm sorry, your brother's David.
Brother David. Yep.
Sorry. And I have a friend out here named David Levy who just played in a poker tournament. So for some reason, I'm always thinking of David Levy.
That's funny.
So forgive me, Andy.
Yep.
But Andy is a big financial guy. How much of his mentality and upbringing has influenced you to get into this, the poker mentality?
I think quite a bit. I mean, although he doesn't play poker himself, through just learning discipline, patience, kind of the grinding mentality of how to be successful. He's had a pretty good career and nobody handed him anything. So I think having that mentality and the work ethic, from my grandparents down to my parents, down to me, was definitely key factors there for sure.
Now, you and I have talked a little bit offline, going on a few jogs through our old middle school.
A couple months ago.
Yeah. About skills that are relatable.
Yes.
Did they set you up on stocks? Are there any kind of things that young people can learn that help their mental game?
I think playing poker is analogous in a lot of ways to trading stocks because It requires the same analytical skills. It requires quick thinking, requires some math skills to a point, and logic skills, and also the discipline that's needed to succeed and the patience are both things that if you get overzealous in poker, you could, as you know, you could lose your money quickly. And likewise in like a trading or an investing type thing where it's not a long-term investment, could definitely be same kind of skills.
So, being that you come from a family of poker players, like some people, kind of get into it, like, Doyle.
Right.
And Todd
Well, I
Vincent.
did have my mom's side of the family has a lot of people that were in gambling in various forms. And my grandmother, the old timers playing the track and that kind of stuff back in the day. So there was some of that, but
Some glory
my
stories.
parents directly, no. So.
Well, did any of that then contribute to your desire your curiosity?
Well, that's the old. If it's genetics, perhaps it definitely could have. I don't know, but it's definitely. My grandmother liked to gamble.
Grandma never snuck you into a casino on your visits to Florida or anything?
Well, there was one time on a cruise where I snuck in to play blackjack when I was about 14, and the usual, March Madness pools and the card games with your friends and that kind of stuff. So. It was kind of an interest of mine from an early point. I didn't intend to make it a career till later. I kind of just fell into it, but that's another.
So you've been now currently you're back playing, but you mentioned you've had like a on again off again relationship with being a professional.
That's correct.
How did that evolution start for you?
Yep. So I went to college in SUNY Albany with an economics degree. At that time, this was 2007, I would go to Turning Stone Casino, which is in upstate New York. It's a real locals casino. It had good 1-2 games, which is the lowest poker you could play. So just getting experience at the 1-2 games was good. And just going through that. And then when I graduated college, it just shows how much of life is timing. The financial collapse was taking place soon after. I was an economics major, and jobs are hard to come by. I always wanted to live in Las Vegas. My brother had played a lot of poker. I'd kind of learned from him, honed my skills between that and Turning Stone, and just decided to make the move to Las Vegas to play poker professionally in 2009. And I remained out there till 2016, which point I decided to move back east. Had a brief stint in Florida playing, and then came back up to New York to pursue some non-poker opportunities, and then decided to return to poker, and that's where I am currently. So.
Yeah, you mentioned some key dates in there. I know, was it around 2008 when the whole internet boom of poker was going on?
Yeah, it was that. Yes, that's probably around correct. Well, the TV boom was 2003 when I was in high school, and the online boom was between 2001 and 2008, and then in 2009 came, I believe, 2011 was Black Friday, where they banned internet poker pretty much, and I wasn't really a big internet poker guy. Played it, tried to grind out some money, but it just wasn't. Much more difficult games, and no human interaction. So prefer the live.
You don't get
variety.
the satisfaction out of even the small things at a poker table of small talk or
exactly any benefit. Exactly, it's kind of just almost like playing a computer game, and and so that got pretty much banned. It's now a little bit making a comeback, but yeah, so I kind of just it was a combination of timing. I had an entrepreneurial mind. I always wanted to work for myself and kind of call my own shots and determine when to work and where I want to work and kind of get out of something what I put into it. So all those factors kind of led me to kind of where I ended up. So.
Yeah. Again, we're live with Mr. Michael Levy, professional poker player. If you have questions, I want to know more about the grind, the lifestyle, the mental challenges, which is what we focus on here on the show, and tips and tools from professionals. Please comment in now, and we'll see if we can get to your questions while we're here. But Michael, moving to Vegas, I mean, I've played in a lot of tournaments, but there's something about Vegas, the mystique behind it, the history behind it.
Yes.
I mean, how was that for you?
It's
how did you set yourself
for my money? For my money, in terms of nice poker rooms and high stakes games, and possibly seeing famous people and being treated well, it's a great place to play. It does have the reputation of having the toughest games in the country, because a lot of professionals go out there for the reasons I stated, and Vegas is a nice place to live. It's inexpensive. You have a lot of food that's very good. You have warm weather, pretty girls, a lot of things to do.
So mentioning the food.
A lot of professional poker players.
You keep mentioning the food. How good is the food at the casinos in Vegas?
It's so they give you $2 an hour complimentary, and you could use it. I played at the Bellagio a lot the last few years of my tenure there, and for $20 you could get a great meal. So you put in a shift, an 8-hour shift, and pretty much getting free, nice meal at a 4-star casino. So
yeah,
that was nice.
All right. Let's see. I got to compare that to my Commerce.
Commerce has very good food and pretty undervalued. LA has great poker as well. Not to get on a sidetrack, but Vegas, in terms of aesthetics, all that, the allure. Vegas is great, the World Series, all that, but it does have tough games. I've been to LA on short trips, and great action in LA at the Commerce, as you said, and Hawaiian Gardens, Hollywood Park, from what people tell me, are very good too.
So you mentioned, location, environment. How important is that as part of that, the poker player lifestyle, about knowing which games you're going to play, how your routine is going to go, and how much of that did you learn through experience, or how much did people give you kind of tips?
That's a great point. Yeah, that's an underrated thing that I never thought about when I was becoming a pro, is what hours you work, who you're going to be coming into contact with, what the rest of your life's going to be like when you're not playing poker. And Vegas, that could become a struggle. If you have a singular focus to just play cards and make money, which is great, it comes at a cost of other things that you could be doing. Just like in any business where you're putting in a lot of hours, and these are sometimes late night hours when the games are good. So it gets tough on your sleep and things like that. And part of the reason I moved to Florida was they had a 5-10 no limit game at 9 o'clock in the morning every day. So I could feel like I could play a 9 to 5, just like the guy going to his office, and I could be home at a normal time and, do things at the normal times that people my age are doing them, and go on dates and all that stuff. So I think it's very important, and you have to strike a compromise between how much the extra money of maybe playing late at night is worth, or, the opportunity cost of seeing your family or doing something fun, or various other things you could be doing.
So did you find
definitely important? Yeah.
Did you find a peer group or a mentor, anybody that you saw doing it well, that's kind of maintained relationships?
Yep. I forged a lot of good relationships with poker players, and when you're in casinos 5 days a week, you see a lot of the same people. It's kind of just how it goes. And Vegas has a lot of old-time gamblers, since it was the only place to gamble for many years. So a lot of old-time gamblers who will pass on little nuggets of wisdom to you, because they've seen it all through 30 years out there, people screwing up all kinds of things. And so they give you advice, and then, you meet fellow pros at the table who, although you're competitive, you have a camaraderie off the felt where you go out to eat with them. You might talk about hands with them, and, text hands to a point with them. And you kind of
share some bad beat stories.
Yeah, you kind of just, it's like a camaraderie off the table, to where you kind of help each other to a point and become friendly and all that. So
So do you share your worst bad beat story or?
Those usually, my brother Dave, who has been a good. When I lived in Vegas and he was trading, working the same shift as me, almost 3 hours. I was the opposite of what we are. He was East Coast and I was West Coast, and I would call him with bad beats. And since he's into poker, I would tell him a lot of the hands. And when you have text groups, you're not trying to. Everybody takes bad beats, unfortunately, and you're not trying to, mention, I got my aces cracked or whatever. Things happen all the time, and kind of just becomes part of the business, and you just kind of accept it and move on to another day.
Well, that's a mature, evolved perspective, right? Because in the short run,
yes.
for a competitor, I mean, most people people want to come out with a positive bankroll. The nicest of people at the time, even Daniel Negreanu, right?
Absolutely,
nicest guy. So,
So
how do you maintain that positive mindset? And
it's it's a challenge. It's taken a lot of time and a lot of experience. Basically, now I'm at the point where I'm playing a fairly low stakes game compared to my bankroll, so not in any kind of jeopardy. And being conservative with your bankroll is like a number one thing for pros. That is a downfall for a lot of people, that they don't grind up from the bottom and they just try to hit it rich with playing with, and their expenses and their losses kind of outpace their gains. But in terms of mindset, just kind of taking it one day at a time. I mean, you're going to take bad beats. You're going to be 70-80% favorite. And get your money in, and you're going to lose. And it's going to happen several times in a day, a week, a month. And you have to kind of just, as long as you play well, you have to just accept the results. If you make a mistake and you play a hand poorly, you have to avoid the whole self-pity and get upset at yourself and all that. And that's where texting a friend or asking someone, did I play this hand well, and them kind of confirm to you. That way you could kind of flush it out of your system and just kind of treat it as if you're a baseball player, and baseball player fails out 7 out of 10 times. So, I mean, you're going to fail in the poker session. You might only win 60% of the time or whatever. And you kind of just have to put yourself in good positions. When you feel well, your mindset's good. You're not hungry, you're tired, you're not thinking about other things. I mean, that's going to happen once in a while over the course of 30, 40-hour weeks of playing. But, surrounding yourself with good people is key too. Positive people that are in your realm of ability and kind of success, I guess. Not necessarily, but just peer groups of people that you hold in the same strata of you, pretty much.
Would you enter like a same tournament with a group of friends, or take stake in one another? I mean, what things do you do?
Well, in terms of tournaments, there wasn't really much. I did become kind of friendly with a few Bellagio dealers who would they would have a home game at their house now and then. And the funny thing is, just like I guess anything, if you're doing something as a job, on my nights off, I didn't really want to go have 4 cards in my hand and be thinking about cards. I kind of just wanted to do other things. And meanwhile, these guys wanted to play cards like as their recreation. So didn't do a whole lot of the home game stuff. The other thing what was the other thing what was the other thing you just said with that? Tournaments with your friends and
if you do anything to make it interesting, like taking a stake of one another.
Taking a stake of one. Yes. Sorry.
So then for the layman, it becomes like
so it's pretty commonplace in Vegas and in the poker community for people play the main event every year, $10,000 buy-in. As you know, most people can't or don't want to put up $10,000 of their own money because that's a lot of money, and tournaments have a lot of variance, as you know. So traditionally, people will sell off 5% of themselves, 10%, 2%, whatever, to friends of theirs. And
Looks like your
He'll
friend
sell.
your
Excuse me.
friend Danny is writing back about the days of eating duck tableside at the Bellagio 5.
Yeah, and Salmon Benedict was another one of our
The
favorites.
food must have been really good. You know, I didn't think that was the motivation that I would get out of this conversation. But
I know, you never know where it's going to go. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't eating. It's not like I was eating a steak and lobster at the table every day. Let's not be. I'm not being. Not trying to overdo it, but
so
it was nice to have a nice meal now and then.
Game selection could be based on menu. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, there were certain casinos with better tableside food. Unfortunately, now in the Northeast, the options are kind of crappy, and so that's just kind of, you kind of eat beforehand, or there's a few options, but Vegas had the upper hand in that regard for sure. Yes. But yeah, back to the staking. Yeah, so people would buy stakes in tournaments. That's pretty commonplace. And cash games, if someone was maybe playing above, like, playing 25, 50, or 50, 100, and they weren't bankrolled, they might send a text to their group of friends, like, does anyone want 5% of my action? But that's kind of a little bit on the, obviously not if they're playing in the same game, because that's unethical, but yeah, of course, people want to lower their risk and involve their friends. It's a fun sweat where you could watch your friend play and maybe make a little money. So that does happen, which is fun.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because one of the concerns around like online poker was that the ability to trust the ethics
Absolutely.
behind it, and that people weren't collusion, which is people playing together versus the field, which certainly eliminates aspects of skill and luck. How did you find that being in Vegas?
You know what? It's actually, that's kind of the myth that I think that probably a lot of people have, is that, how do I know two people aren't playing together and raising the pot and pushing me out? And in reality, it just does not happen very much. The floor people in Las Vegas are pretty skilled at, the players are pretty seasoned in Vegas. The floor was skilled. Like, it's pretty obvious in a game that you're playing when you have experience if the same two people are, doing anything that looks nefarious, where they're raising the pot and showing bad hands and things like that. It's kind of easy to spot, and people will get a warning, and usually they'll stop after that if they were doing it. Or sometimes you think people are doing it and they're not. They're just playing badly. So.
So you'll hear stories about that so and so pro is banned from, or I don't know what they start with.
I've actually heard. Well, LA actually has a worse reputation for having, like, what shooting an angle is.
No, explain it to us.
It's technically using the rules to gain an edge, but it's really not ethical. It's basically like saying, not to get too technical with the dealing and the rules, but on the river, you bet $50 on the river and I call. If I throw in $1 chip, they consider that a call, even though I didn't put in my whole $50. Right. And there was a guy in Vegas who tried to say, in a much bigger pot, I was only throwing in that $1 chip to tip the waitress, not to call your bet. And when it was clear, he was calling the bet. And or there was a guy at Bellagio who will remain nameless. The people that played there will know him, and he was known to kind of do the same thing against tourists, which was really bad for business. And he would verbally announce, "I raise," and not say the amount, and people behind him to act would start folding their hand or calling, and his goal was to see what they were going to do behind him, within the rules. And he was kind of breaking the rules, and he was bad for business, and other professionals complained, but that kind of stuff, it's few and far between, fortunately.
But the floor is there to protect against patterns like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what you're alluding to, basically, that was probably a problem online, from what I hear, because you just don't know where the people you're playing against are located. You don't know if they're sitting in the same room. They could be on the phone. You don't know what they're doing. So,
right, and you don't need.
That's a problem with online.
You don't need any of those thoughts going through your head when you're trying to make a pressure decision
exactly. No, and it's just one of those things that just doesn't happen as much as probably anyone would think. So luckily.
So shooting an angle, I like that. I like that term. Yeah, I think the winner of the World Series of Poker, right? Isn't he banned from some casino right now?
Well, yeah, it's possible. I don't keep up that much with the TV poker and all that. I mean, I watch the WPT now and then. Mike Sexton was great, and I watch the World Series now and then. But I've known people that have gotten pretty far, which is cool. And it's just, yeah, there are people banned from casinos for all sorts of reasons, though. Just to tell you, it doesn't have to do with people are banned for all sorts of just the casino is a private business. They have the right to ban anyone for whatever reason they want.
So, but you're not on any banned list yet.
No, fortunately. I mean, me and my friends and I always laugh. Like all you have to do to not get banned is just show up and be a human being and not do anything illegal or unethical, terribly unethical, or even if you do something unethical, it's usually like a 1-day ban or something, and I've never even gotten one of those. It's just if you just go and play the game and you're good, do the normal things, and don't do anything in a casino. Don't try to steal or cheat or do anything or rob anybody or anything. You won't get banned. It's just people that there's a lot of money in a casino. People try all sorts of tricks and things, and usually it doesn't work. There's cameras everywhere, so
yeah, and you're pretty savvy to what's around you.
Exactly.
So
yes.
Talk to me about now a little bit about the sports psychology elements of both mental preparation. We could call it anxiety maintenance or energy management is the appropriate term, because you mentioned a couple of things, poker specific to the when the betting is coming on the flop, turn, and river, and a bad beat. So there's scenarios that you just don't know when you might be in one. Where your logical prediction that you're favored, like you mentioned, 80% of the time, is going through your brain, and like I shared with you, and all of a sudden your aces and your sure hand is all of a sudden turned into a loss. So how do you cope with that? How have you did you learn it? I mean,
well, after a lot of experience, you kind of on certain board textures, you could kind of tell if you're getting all your money in with 3 of a kind on a flop of 2, 4, 6, and you have a set of 4s. Maybe this is a bad example, but either way, my point is you have an idea pretty much based on the texture. Oh, they probably have a nut flush draw on this board, or I'm probably getting it in against this range of hands, and you kind of know what you're up against. In the case where you get your money in a head and there's 2 cards to come and they draw out on you, when you get your money in, you're excited, of course, and as you said, by the time the hand's over, you could have a loss. And I have noticed when these pile up on you, which can happen, it's best to take a walk. You get up from your chair, you take a 10-minute walk if it's bothering you. You get some fresh air, you just walk it off. Occasionally there's someone at the table who's bothering you for whatever reason. They're whatever they're doing or whatever they're saying is bothering you. There's just all sorts of factors. They're wearing a big
Terrell Owens jersey and they're just
the case for me, I have to sometimes see Eagles jerseys or things like that, Phillies jerseys or Jets jerseys, but no. But you just have, some people have bad etiquette. They beat you in the hand and they ask you what you had afterwards, which is kind of bad etiquette. But they're just they're just really curious what you had.
So that's a good point, because you're a modest guy. Your father, very very proud, very reserved. So if you get somebody who's in your face and doesn't stop pestering you.
Usually it's not a personal. It's very rarely a personal thing.
Just personality styles, though.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Sometimes there's very loud, cocky people that could be obnoxious, and you could utilize headphones in those cases, or if they're good for the game, aka they play a lot of hands, you could engage them a little bit. Most people are there to have fun. You got to make the table fun if you can, and you kind of just go with the flow of the table. But you definitely, the higher you play, the more pressure I was feeling until I play a certain number of hours at a stake, moving up stakes from 1-2 to 2-5 to 5-10 to occasionally 10-20. Your heart beats a little faster when you're playing bigger. You have tougher decisions. You're playing for more money. But after a while, you get comfortable. You tell yourself, these are just chips. I'm just playing poker. The game's the same. You're still playing against human beings. But your heart could race a little fast when you have, a couple thousand on the line versus 500 or whatever at a time.
Right. So that's an important point, because there's an attachment. We know money's an attachment to our emotions, yep. and when there's a real value to paying your own rent, and you're sitting down with the reality that whatever your bankroll is could represent a significant portion of what
yep.
you live off of. So how did you learn that attachment, and how did you learn about bankroll management and
yep.
about separating yourself from the attachment
yep.
to the money?
That's a great question. Yeah, that's a critical, as I stated at the top of the show, bankroll management is so critical. And, I was not working prior to coming out to Vegas, and my skills were not – I had some confidence issues. I hadn't sat and played 2-5. I had only played 1-2 before, so – going out there with
management for our layman, Michael.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's
1-2. So 1-2, no limit hold'em is
mm-hmm.
the blinds are $1 and $2. So you have to post a small blind of $1 every 9 hands, and a big blind of $2 every 9 hands. And the other 7 hands you could fold away if you so choose. You don't have to put any money in the pot. And
so it's about 30 big blinds. You're supposed to sit down with about 30 big blinds, or what is the standard?
Well, that's a little bit light. The buy-ins in the 1-2 games were usually between 60 and 200 or 300. Towards my later time, it ended up being like 100 minimum, so it's 50 big blind minimum to 100 or 200 big blind max. LA is known for having smaller caps. LA, I believe, has a 5-5 game with maybe a $300 minimum or something like that. So, but I typically would buy in 100 big blinds, especially when I started, 80 to 100 big blinds, because for me, I was just very comfortable playing that stack. It was pretty straightforward. That's the strategy I learned on. You don't want to get, when you have a lot of money behind, the decisions get a little trickier. When you flop a big hand and the board runs out unfavorable to your hand, you could get into some tricky situations. So you have to stay within your means. I started at the 1-2 games, played them till I was comfortable to play 2-5, which is the next level up in Las Vegas and most places, which still, that's about the first level you could really make a living. 1-2, you're looking at not a great hourly rate. I was fortunate to take advantage of a promotion out there 10 years ago where they were giving away some free money to get people in the room, so that helped my bankroll. But typically 1-2, you really can't make a real living at.
Because
when you get
think
to
they
2-5,
say a professional player makes about one big bet per hour, so whatever that.
Well, the big bet term, I think, is online, but I'm not positive. It's typically in live poker. People have a win rate anywhere between 4 and 10 big blinds per hour, I would say. So in a 1-2 game, and I'd say in 1-2 because of the rake and the stacks, that 10 big blinds maybe isn't even possible. So you're looking at between $8 and $16 an hour in 1-2, which, that's not.
So
it's a tough way to make a living.
Nothing ventured, nothing gained, right?
Yep. So when you get, so you could do the math. When you get to 2-5 or 5-10, you're looking at like a living wage and you still have players in those levels that are recreational. And I got over the fear, to get back to your point about fear and that stuff and overcoming anxiety. Moving up stakes from 1-2 to 2-5 or 2-5 to 5-10 or 5-10 to 10-20 involves some anxiety. Money-wise, getting used to playing for more money, getting used to playing with tougher players, different players. Games play a little differently. Bigger games are usually more aggressive. There's a lot of factors, and it usually takes a decent amount of time, a couple months, it could be longer, to get to where you're really comfortable with the game and to where, a losing session is not going to send you down a spiral because, just remember, you get paid. Poker is an hourly job. You only get paid when you show up to the casino. If you have a bad day and you want to take 4 days off, well, guess what? You're not going to get paid for 4 days, and that's just delaying getting your losses back when you try to go play next time.
So that's a very, mature workman-like perspective, which leads me to, kind of, what do you see with a lot more younger people, becoming professional players? Do you find yourself, mentoring other people with that kind of struggle?
Well, it's funny now with online poker not being as big, I don't see as many younger. As you go up, the pros are kind of old. In Vegas, the pros were older in 5-10 than any other stake because it requires a decent bankroll to play that game on a regular basis. So most 21 to 24-year-olds don't have a bankroll where they could play 5-10. On occasion, there were young people playing the games, but now I would have to say I don't recommend a 21-year-old to start being a poker pro like in today's environment. I just it depends. Of course, it depends a lot on what your options are, though. That's a big factor. So for some people, it could be the right thing, but poker, people are getting better. I don't really mentor anybody. There was friends of friends who were younger than us who one guy kind of looked up to me a little bit in how I worked and how I played and picked my brain a lot, but he's since moved on to some other endeavors. And currently where I play now in the Northeast, I don't really know many of the players, and my friends I talk to are just away from the felt, not at the table, because you don't want to make it look like to the recreational players that you all know each other. And
so you're keeping a safe distance between the workplace and your social life.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with making small, saying hi, giving a nod, or someone's talking, you're doing general talk, but nothing specific at the table with your buddies or anything like that. And so, you're just, no mentor right now. Nobody I'm mentoring right now. After the online bubble bursted in 11, there was not a whole lot of new people coming up through the ranks, like from online, nationally and internationally, because the games don't exist on Poker Stars and Full Tilt anymore. So the avenues, you have to really be disciplined. And there's people that play in their local casino in, Milwaukee or St. Louis or Chicago or New Jersey or wherever, and they pick up and they move to Vegas and they try to make it out there. And some make it, a lot, and most don't. And
well, that's a good point, because access is limited. And when they were able to play with moving to a house in Vegas with 4 screens up and
exactly
get a whole bunch of buddies and do it.
Exactly. Live poker enabled people to play very easily, and you're seeing a lot of hands, so and the games were good for a time. So there were people, it was like a gold rush. Like, there were people that made a lot of money during that time. I was not one of them. I wasn't in that world or that game at that time at all. But that was the thing. Now the people you see for a while, you tend to see a lot of the same people, and you know who the good players are. They know who you are. And it's difficult to move up and save money and all those things. You have to treat it like a business, and
it doesn't get any easier, right? I mean, you're always battling the deck and you're battling your opponent.
Yeah, no, it doesn't get easier. And some people, there's people I played with in Vegas in the last few years who are around my age who have started to they left poker or they cut back on their hours and they pursued other opportunities in various, technology or finance or real estate or other avenues.
Yeah, so talk to me about that real quick, Michael, because that's something that you've done really well with in terms of acquiring skills, seeing this as business, seeing this as something you're talented at and that you can succeed in. And yet, how do you know as a poker player, let's say, I don't know, you do earn, let's say you get a bankroll of 50 or 100K. How do you know when you can put money into a down payment on a house, or how do you know when you can pull it out?
Well,
how do you learn that money management versus what goes back into your
that stuff? That's a great question. That's it's very personal. You have to do what works for you. I've heard people say that you should have 6 months living expenses, like in a separate account to draw down from. Like when you're playing poker, you don't touch your poker money, then you just live out of that 6 months. I did that at the beginning, maybe. I had some money set aside to pay my bills in case I flopped and whatever. Luckily that didn't happen. And as you get, as time goes on, you have some challenges too in terms of getting a mortgage and, because it's in a little bit of an unconventional living, getting a mortgage, you obviously could use banks, but saving money is prudent. We're not getting sick days. We're not getting a pension or things like that. So I learned from my parents and grandparents, and I kind of had this too, to live within my means and I like to do nice things, but luckily I don't have a penchant to have money burn a hole in my pocket every time I get it and things like that. Because just because you make $500 today and you played 5 hours of poker doesn't mean you make $100 an hour in poker. It probably just means you got lucky that day. And what you're going to make is what you're going to make over thousands of hours, and you just have to kind of treat it as such. And probably a regular habit would be to deposit on months that you win, you deposit some excess money into a bank account where you maybe put it in a 401k or an IRA or some real estate investments or some safe investments to where you can maybe access it. But
sounds like your next career might be a money manager for poker players.
It's a nice niche. I wouldn't want to pick investments for people. While we're on that topic, it's funny in Vegas. There's a lot of people trying to sell poker players on investments and stuff, and a lot of them went belly up. And that's where reading people was a good thing, because if you don't understand what someone's telling you about a business or anything, you're better to just stay away from it, because you have to really understand where you're putting your money and what you're doing and how much you're saving and all this, because as you said, it's critical. You need liquidity for when you hit a bad run of poker. That's why you have to play within your means, and it all cycles back to what you said about planning and saving money. And how much to save on a down payment and when is kind of arbitrary. I can't really comment on that. But buying a house is something I'd like to do in maybe the next few years. And I don't know how that's going to go yet. But it's definitely, I regret not buying something in Vegas. The real estate went up quite a bit out there. And some people I know did buy, and they did pretty well. So good for them. And it's definitely important to invest and put money away and not go out to the club and go travel and take a lot of time off just because you had one good month or 2 good months, because math is math, and it goes just as when you run bad, it turns good for you. When you're running really good, it could turn bad for, a lot of pros have a losing month a year, or sometimes two.
That was a very key point of learning for me, that statistical variance. You could take it a statistical, class in college or high school, but living through it, and you don't know when that, that curve is going to swing back the other way, or in
No.
the short run, anything is possible.
Yep. I found a great trick for me was there's a app on your cell phone, Poker Income Journal, and there's another one. There's others too, but you enter every session and how long you played and where you played and how much you won or lost, and it keeps statistics on your playing indefinitely. So I originally had a computer program on my old Acer computer, which is now destroyed and I don't have it anymore. So I did lose some data, but I have a lot of data. I still remember the numbers, and it's nice, and it puts it in a graph form. So when you're losing, and you can look at your statistics and say, oh, over the last year, 2 years, 3 years, I've won in these games. Look at my graph. Every time it's gone down, it's always come back up. And when you do that, it kind of reassures you to just keep playing your game, not trying to change and do something drastic, because you know what tilt is, obviously, from your time playing limited. How tilt is when you get overly upset, good or bad.
Based
it could be
on
winner
emotional
still too.
reaction to the short run, right?
It impacts your thought process in a negative way, and could really send you. It's like a professional golfer misses a 2-foot putt, and then they get to the next tee and they're still thinking about it. That putt, you just have to move on, and
yeah, it's a law of attraction. Like you believe you're going to lose, and the person next to you feels, gee, there's something off emotionally. It's really it's some combination of odds and emotional cues and body language, which I guess we could go a whole nother show on. I'm not as big with the body language. Body language is kind of another thing I would say could be debunked a little bit. Maybe it's not my area really that I thrive in, so I'm not debunking it with really any expert knowledge. I'm just saying, for me, the whole thing about, oh, they bet fast so they're weak, or they bet this so they're strong, that stuff kind of just depends. Everything's player dependent. There's not really any telltale rule. There are people, people win a big pot, they kind of start talking a lot afterwards, and I just try to stay even keeled. You're naturally, losing stinks. I mean, you're a competitive guy. I know from the basketball court, I'm a competitive guy. Losing's not fun. You don't enjoy it. You just have to, unfortunately just have to accept it as part of the process, and you understand it's just part of what goes into it, and you're going to have more wins than losses. And it affects how your opponents play you, how you react to your winning and losing as well.
Exactly. And that's another great thing you touched on. If an opponent sees you going on tilt in, a 5-10 game at the Bellagio, people are going to see blood in the water, and it just seems, if you start trying to raise more pots than you should, they're going to re-raise you. It just seems like when things are going wrong, they sense you're frustrated. You're shaking your head, which I've done before inadvertently. You start muttering to yourself or various things where you're just frustrated, and people sense that. They kind of see you as kind of easy prey. You kind of might expose yourself a little bit. Whereas if you just take the beat, you move on, you just keep playing like not that nothing happened. You're going to internally, you can be upset, or you walk away, as I said before, and you kind of curse to yourself for a minute and say, all right, back, got to forget about it.
So, Michael, I think we're running out of time on our segment today, but last thoughts from you. What's your favorite book for amateurs to read out there?
Okay.
Sorry
I was a little long-winded on some. We got into
great.
You asked 3 questions. We got into a lot of stuff.
No, it's perfect. We can have you back on. We can have you out here in a tournament in L.A. or Vegas.
I would love to go to L.A. I love the poker out there. Commerce is great. I used to go in the summer when Vegas was 115 degrees.
Maybe I'll be the guy you mentor outside the 1-2 game.
Sounds good. I would be happy to do it. Final thoughts for websites. 2+2 Collusion.com is really the only poker site out there. There's training sites that I never really got into. They're selling you stuff. I don't get into really the training sites. Books. There's Ed Miller books, which are a little bit outdated now, but Ed Miller's books are good. There's a book, Let There Be Range, which is an internet book. And there's 2plus2.com. And those are the best learning tools, I would say. And people, if anyone wants to reach out to me or any questions or anything.
Yeah, where can they get you, Michael?
Well, I have Facebook, email, and Twitter. Mostly Twitter, and Twitter would be preferred, I guess. Twitter would be MPL1184, or they could email me at mplevy3@gmail.com, which is my email for that, and that's really it.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for making time, and I wish you an easy fast, and that your suffering will lead to a lot more big pots and big wins, so you can make it out here for a big tournament.
Thanks, Richard. I hope you have an easy fast, and happy belated New Year, and better luck to the Mets next year and the Giants the rest of the year.
The Mets are having a good September,
Yes, they are.
1 month
yes,
at a time.
So,
all right.
hope
Thanks
the family's
again.
well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Michael. Take care.
Okay.
Best to your family.